The world was shocked when Val Kilmer died, but fans were not ready for what they found out afterward. As Hollywood mourned the death of one of its biggest stars, a disturbing document came to light. There were disturbing and surprising facts in Val Kilmer's autopsy report that made everyone wonder what really happened in his last days. This is not the story that you read in the news. What was quietly hidden behind the honors and movie clips was this: the truth that changes everything you thought you knew about the last part of Val Kilmer's life. Wait until you see what's in that report. It will shock you. Hollywood is sad about Val Kilmer's sudden death. Val Kilmer had died on April 1st, 2025. The news hit Hollywood and the rest of the world like a punch in the gut. He died at the age of 65. He was best known for his unforgettable parts in Top Gun, Batman Forever, and The Doors. The formal statement says it was caused by complications from pneumonia. But as the news spread on social media, fans paid respect. It felt like there was something missing from the story. Almost right away, the tributes began to come in. Director Michael Mann, who worked with Kilmer on Heat, said that he was a bright, unpredictable force that changed every scene he was in. Josh Brolin sent a message from the heart. "See you, buddy. I will miss you. You had a lot of courage and creativity." Even the official Top Gun account wrote about how sad they were about the death of their beloved Iceman, with a feeling that it happened too soon. Still, there were whispers in the background of the flowers, comments, and media coverage. People had known for years that Val Kilmer was sick. He fought a long public fight with throat cancer. After years of rumors and denial, he finally told everyone about it in 2017. Fans saw him fight to breathe and lose his voice, and finally fade into the background, except for one last strong performance in Top Gun, Maverick. But many people knew it was time for him to leave when he came back to the screen with the help of voice AI and creative filmmaking. Still, most people thought that the long-term damage from his cancer treatment was what killed him when they heard the news. Pneumonia in a body that was already weak wasn't a surprise. What came next was what caught me off guard. As Kilmer's death approached, tributes kept coming in and the media played endless highlight reels of his best parts. But behind closed doors, a different conversation began. People he was close with, old coworkers, and even family members began to say they hadn't known how bad things were. A lot of people seemed to think that Val Kilmer had been pulling away from people more and more in the months before he died, ignoring calls, guests, and offers of help. Fans started to ask questions right away for sure. Why had no one seen him in public for months? Why did people say that he had been to the hospital several times in the past year but it never made the news? And why did it take so long to release his full autopsy report, even though pneumonia was the stated cause of death? It was easy for these questions to get lost in all the honors at first, but some writers didn't give up. Some people said that the autopsy showed something scary. There were many details that were not what anyone expected. There were hints that Kilmer's last days may have been even darker than everyone knew. But for now, everyone was sad. Fans watched their favorite Val Kilmer movies again. A lot of old interviews, movie clips, and pictures of Kilmer smiling in his prime were shared on social media. But there was a quiet feeling of discomfort behind the sadness. The news stories told how he died, but the real story, which was hidden in the small print of his final medical report, was still to be found. And when it came to the surface, everyone was shocked. How Val Kilmer rose to fame and became a Hollywood mystery. Before the funerals, press coverage, and questions about what the autopsy showed, Val Kilmer was a completely different person. He was a force in Hollywood. He was one of the few actors who could both light up the screen and hide behind a character so well. But he was also the subject of rumors, conflict, and mystery long before he died. It was quick and easy to remember Val Kilmer's rise. He was born in Los Angeles in 1959 and grew up in California. He became interested in art at a young age. At the time, he was the youngest person to ever be accepted into Juilliard's prestigious drama school. After that, it wasn't long before Hollywood called. In 1984, he got his big break with the comedy Top Secret, which showed that he could switch between being charming and crazy. But Top Gun, which came out in 1986, made him famous. As the cool and cocky faux Iceman Kazansky, Kilmer easily stole scenes from Tom Cruise. He became the heart of the story in some way. After that, his career took off. He was so good at playing parts like Jim Morrison in The Doors that it was spooky. The rest of Morrison's band was shocked too. Also, he played Doc Holliday in Tombstone, where his role as the Southern shooter became famous. He played Batman in Batman Forever, which was one of the biggest hits of the 1990s. But that part came with its own risks. Because as his fame grew, so did reports that Val Kilmer was hard to get along with. There were stories from movie sets going around. Directors said he was difficult to work with, unreliable, and even hostile. On the crazy set of The Island of Dr. Moreau, Kilmer got into so many fights with the cast and crew that one director quit. Joel Schumacher, who directed him in Batman Forever, said he was the most difficult character he'd ever worked with and that he was mentally ill. It was later said that Kilmer was misunderstood because he was a perfectionist who wanted to get into his parts and wasn't afraid to say what he thought. But the damage to his image didn't go away. In the early 2000s, he stopped being as bankable and well-known for a while, and he quietly pulled back from the center of Hollywood. But Kilmer had a charm about him that got people interested. Even though the press said he was moody, directors kept hiring him. People watched on. It seemed like there was a man wrestling with something much bigger than the roles he played. This was what people saw. Then the sickness came. There were rumors around 2014 that Kilmer's health was getting worse, but he didn't say anything. No one talked about his obvious weight loss, his raspy voice, or the appearances that he had to cancel in public. He claimed having cancer for years, even when friends and fans could see that something was wrong. Kilmer didn't finally say it again in 2017. He had been beating throat cancer, which he kept secret while he went through chemotherapy, radiation, and finally a tracheotomy that took away his voice. Fans liked how honest he was when he finally talked about it. When he came out in public again, weak but smiling, they praised his strength. They saw it as a win and a chance to make a comeback when he came back as Iceman, Top Gun, and Maverick. But here's the thing. It was clear that Kilmer had kept a lot from the public as you learned more about his life. Yes, she had many memorable parts, but there were also years of stress, silence, and lack of information about what was really going on behind the scenes. And it wasn't just during his career. No one knew at the time, not even his family and closest friends, that he would always need to hide and protect his privacy. It wasn't just during his illness or job. It would stick with him until the end. And the most upsetting part of his story wouldn't be in the press or in interviews. It would be based on what was found after he died. The secret fight that Kilmer was having with cancer. People thought Val Kilmer's public life was all high points for years. On red carpets, in hit movies, and in interviews, he always had that smile on his face. Kilmer was facing a battle he wouldn't talk about, though. Behind the news stories and camera flashes. When everyone found out, the fight had already cost him almost everything. It started out slowly. Fans began to notice that he was different around the year 2014. He looked weaker and thinner. When he was in public, his voice sounded rough and hoarse. Events were canceled, he was said to be in the hospital, and pictures of him that looked weak were blurry. There were rumors that he was very sick, but every time the press asked, Kilmer denied it. He kept saying he was fine when it was clear he wasn't. The truth didn't come out until 2017. Kilmer told The Hollywood Reporter in an interview what many people already thought. He had been told that he had throat cancer. He had radiation, chemotherapy, and a tracheotomy over the past 3 years, which changed his ability to speak forever. In classic Kilmer style, he played it down, laughing about his rough voice and saying he was fine. But there was more to the story than that. They saved his life, but they also took away almost everything else. His once strong voice, which you could hear in movies like The Doors and Tombstone, was now just a weak whisper. It was hard for him to breathe and eat because his health was weak. He was unable to work as he normally did. This was hell for a man who had spent decades in front of the camera. Instead, he tried to change the story. In 2021, he put out a very personal documentary called Val. Years of home videos and voiceover narration were used to tell his story, from his childhood to his rise in Hollywood to his fight with cancer. The movie was made with the help of his children. It was real, honest, and sometimes hard to watch. People didn't see the polished star, but the weak man behind the fame, for many fans. It was clear that he was losing attention. A lot of his time was spent at home, drawing and writing while his kids and close friends played. Fans thought they saw a legend's successful return, or a comeback. Most people didn't get the real message of that Maverick scene, which was that it wasn't a return but a goodbye. In many ways, Kilmer's role in Maverick was a well-thought-out farewell. He ended things for the crowd, but behind the scenes he was already leaving. No one knew how quickly his health was getting worse. While Iceman fans were happy to see him again, Kilmer quietly faded back into public life. Many people felt their hearts break when they saw that scene. It wasn't the whole story, though, because no one who saw that movie could have thought that Kilmer's real last act wouldn't happen on film. It would happen months after he was gone. No one was willing to read a report. Unmasking of personal life. Family, fame, and being alone. Even with all the fame, money, and parts that people will remember, Val Kilmer rarely talked about his personal life. People knew who he was behind the camera for decades, but they didn't know much about him. And that story got even stranger as the years went by. Like a lot of his work, Kilmer's love life was full of intense and rough times. He married British actress Joanne Whalley in 1988 when he was at the height of his fame. They met on the set of Willow. Young, smart, and pretty, they looked like they came from a Hollywood fairy tale. Benz, born in 1991, and Jack, born in 1995, were their 2 children together. Behind the scenes, though, the stress of fame and personal problems got to them. By 1996, they were no longer married and had a quiet split. Kilmer stayed close to his kids for the most part. He often talked about them as his biggest source of joy in interviews. They were in his documentary Val, and it was clear that after years of ups and downs in Hollywood, they had become his emotional core. Kilmer had good relationships with his children, but his relationships with other people were rough. He was tied to a number of famous women over the years, including Candy Crawford, Daryl Hannah, and even Angelina Jolie while Alexander was being filmed. Tabloids loved the stories, but Kilmer rarely acknowledged or talked about these relationships. It was clear that he kept his private life private. As he got older, that protection turned into something else, being alone. Kilmer's world shrunk after he was told he had cancer. Because of his health problems, he had to stay out of the public eye. But not just in the body. His family and friends noticed that he wasn't letting them in like he used to. People didn't respond to invitations or calls. He was mostly by himself at home in Los Angeles for long periods of time, with his art, diaries, and memories close by. Some of what they said made sense. His body and mind were both worn out from the treatments for his cancer. His body was weak, and his voice was weak. Making public appearances was tiring for Kilmer, but he seemed to be shutting down even when he was alone. His own words show that he was a very spiritual person who believed in images, signs, and the bigger meaning of life. But because he believed that, he was very protective of his place. His goal wasn't to get pity. He didn't want to look like a weakness, but that desire to protect came at a price. In retrospect, Kilmer's friends said that he became harder to reach in the last year of his life. Messages weren't getting back to him. He stayed away from groups. People in his own family said they hadn't seen him in months before he died. From the outside, it looked like a man was living alone and getting better after being sick. But the people who knew him best were getting more and more worried. Was he really having a hard time? Did he have something to hide? Or had fought for years in Hollywood first, then his health had just worn him down? People who were close to him were saddened but not completely shocked when they heard the news of his death. They had seen the signs of decline, like the increased silence and the damage to their bodies. The thing they hadn't seen and couldn't have guessed was what the official report about his death would say. Because there was a truth that no one saw coming beneath the honors and news stories. A truth that showed Kilmer's last months in a much more frightening light. And when that truth finally came out, it made even Val Kilmer's closest friends and family wonder how well they really knew him. The world mourned Val Kilmer's death and then moved on. People streamed his movies, watched his interviews again, and honored his Iceman legacy. After years of health problems, it seemed like the story was over. A well-liked star had died too soon. Then came Val Kilmer's autopsy report, which no one thought would make the news. At first glance, it proved what everyone already knew, that the pneumonia was making the body even weaker. Details that painted a much scarier picture were tucked away further in the report. People weren't shocked by the cause of death. It was something else. In Kilmer's last few months, the coroner's report said there were signs of serious malnutrition. He was much lighter than what was good for someone his height and age. There were clear signs of muscle loss, which doctors said is typical in people with terminal illnesses, but was very far along in this case. It made me think of a tough question. Had he gone without food? Had he given up? That wasn't all, though. Also, several untreated infections, some of which seemed small at first, were brought up, but not taken care of for long enough to make his already weak immune system even weaker. The study says that these infections would have been easy to treat if they had been found earlier. It looked like Kilmer either hadn't seen or hadn't told anyone. What was even scarier were the notes about long-term surgical wounds that hadn't fully closed, some of which were from earlier surgeries for cancer. There were signs of long-term abuse and physical stress, In the months before he died, he refused medical care and chose to stay at home, even though it was clear that he needed help, according to the story. Then there were the toxicology reports. The reports showed that he had high levels of prescription painkillers in his body, but no signs of illegal drugs or an overdose. Not enough to kill him, but enough to show that he had been in a lot of pain that he wasn't able to control. The language used in the report was formal and cold, but the point was clear. Val Kilmer wasn't just dead from a cold. His mental and physical health had been slowly getting worse for a lot longer than anyone around him knew. When the news came out with the details, every headline said the same thing: upsetting details found in Val Kilmer's autopsy report, and they weren't lying. It wasn't that he died that shocked him. It showed how much he had been through, and how much he had kept from his fans, friends, and even his family. Kilmer had spent his last few months acting the same way he had for most of his life. He would do anything to keep his pain hidden, even when it was killing him. The autopsy showed more than just the cause of death in the end. It showed how much he was carrying by himself, the problems he didn't talk about, the wounds he didn't treat, and the quiet fall that no one saw coming. That's the part of Val Kilmer's story people will always remember. What makes someone hide their pain so well that not even their closest friends and family can see it? Is it pride, privacy, or something much deeper?